everyone. I'm Ruth Taylor, Executive Director of the Newport Historical Society, and we do have a special and timely guest today, and I'll ask her to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Oleksandra Kovalchuk. I am an acting director of the Odesa Fine Arts Museum located in Odesa, Ukraine. Unfortunately, with whatever is with the war that is going on right now, I'm currently in Salem, and I'm trying to fundraise to support Odessa cultural institutions and, of course, my museum too, and other cultural institutions of Ukraine.
So I was looking at the museum's webpage this morning, and it was so big and so beautiful. Can you talk to us a little bit about the museum and its collections and its mission before the war?
Well, our website is actually our weak place. We've been striving to make it as informative as possible, but still that work has to be updated, and we're working on that right now, actually. Well, before war, it's painful even to think about it, because couple of months before war, it was already very hard to work, because we've been following the situation. We've been checking all of the news, all of the calls of international officials to the president of Russian Federation, and to everything linked to the possibility of full-scale invasion to Ukraine. And as the American intelligence was saying that Odessa is one of the main goals in this operation for Russian troops, and that they wanted to deploy the Marines in Odessa, we've tried to do our job, day-to-day job, and to plan for the next periods of time, to plan projects and events and exhibitions. At the same time, we've been trying to create the policies for museum in case of the invasion. And it was like bipolar schizophrenia.
Yeah.
Because you have to think a very dark scenario and very positive one at the same time. As for Odesa Fine Arts Museum, last year was at the same time very tragic and complicated, as our director passed away in August. But at the same time, we've managed to gain most of the things we've been fighting for together with him for 4 years. And it was the national status of the museum. We've received funds for full restoration of our historical building. We were supposed to receive a former plant and to revitalize it, to create their second department of museum for 20th and 21st century. We've made the biggest acquirement of contemporary art in the history of our museum, and the first one in the history of independent Ukraine in the last 30 years. So it was a lot of things to be happy for, a lot of plans. And at the same time, we had to figure out what should be our strategy for evacuation of the collection, which pieces should go first, which pieces are in greater risk in case of occupation that happens in a matter of days, or in the scenario when there are street fights and battles in the city, in case there is a bombing or a blockade of the city. And we've had to live in this planning for months. So for us, I can say that war started somewhere in December.
Yeah.
When we've been discussing that.
Every museum does disaster planning, and for so many of us, it's it's a theoretical exercise. You know, there might be a hurricane. This is the disaster that it's nearly impossible to plan for. You all must have been under so much stress.
It's true. It's true. It was psychologically, many Ukrainians were burned out by February, just burned out. It was unbearable stress. And right before the war started, I was thinking that this stress must leave some kind of impact of on our future. And but of course, what war is making makes that a shadow.
Yeah. Did the museum have relationships with the contemporary arts community, with artists who are working now?
Yes, of course, we had a very various exhibitions and projects with contemporary Ukrainian artists from all over Ukraine and those who already lived in other countries by that moment. And as we purchased 668 works of art in 2021, it was mostly contemporary Ukrainian artists. And even when we had to take off the works from the walls on the first day of war, friends of the museum artists came and volunteered to help the team to secure collection as soon as possible. And even what might be also interesting to speak about is that the last project that was in our exhibition hall, it was Pavlo Makov, the Ukrainian artist from Kharkiv, who is now presenting Ukraine at the Venice Biennale. So even when we were recording information about his project for the educational program, he was speaking about his work of art presented at the Ukrainian Pavilion this year. And also his installation that he presented, it was basically the very big model of a map of an apartment where each room belongs to a country and there are no doors. And what he wanted to show was that we live in a world where when something bad is happening in one place, it very fast spreads all over the globe. So that's what it was about. And we've opened on 15th of February, I believe. And now we see that war in Ukraine is impacting all the world. And we see that there are threats of hunger and etc. And humanitarian crisis is just begins.
Yes.
So Ukrainian artists at the moment have different opportunities to be supported in Europe. And of course, there are some who decided to stay inside of Ukraine, especially male ones. Some went to territorial defense forces or to Ukrainian militaries. And they're risking their lives day to day. And we don't know how it will develop in future. And one of the things I've been constantly speaking about here in the United States is an opportunity for American institutions to commission contemporary artworks to Ukrainian artists. Because one of the reasons why I've decided to work in a museum one day was that I've realized that Ukrainian museums and collections are as interesting, inspiring, and important as in international museums. They're just unknown both for Ukrainians and, of course, which is normal and kind of result of the first part, unknown in the world. Same for Ukrainian artists. They are as talented, as interesting, and as bright as any other contemporary artists of the world. The only thing is that they're not very well known and recognized. And I'm sure that it will not be an act of pity or act of just a support. I think that it will benefit both Ukrainian artists and American institutions.
Mm. And the art world generally, to give a broader platform to these artists. I noticed, I'm not sure if it was something I read about your museum or in general, but a lot of historical artists who are known as Russian were in fact Ukrainian, and some of those folks are highlighted in your museum as well.
That's true, and that's what we've been speaking about all the time. Actually, a collection of our museum, as any other Ukrainian museums, gives us an opportunity to speak about history at the first place, and we did it all the time. And right now, there are a lot of efforts from Ukrainian Institute, the organization that is working to spread the information about Ukrainian culture throughout the world. They are working with a couple of institutions like Tate from Great Britain and museums in Chicago. For example, they're already working on relabeling art from the collections, and they are thinking about getting some grants for research, to create a platform that will allow us to explain the methodology, why we consider some artists Ukrainian historically. And as you might have seen that in Mariupol, there was a museum of Archip Kuinji, a Ukrainian artist from with Greek roots who lived in Russian Empire. And his works of art that survived the outrageous blockade and of Mariupol that was basically destroyed 90% of buildings. Can you imagine a city being destroyed completely? There was people buried in the yards. That is something unspeakable. And the works of Kuinji were delivered to Russia governed and controlled the DNR, the separatist region, the Donetsk region. And they took these works of art and relocated them over there, which is also, by the way, a war crime. But the work, this particular work of art by Kuinji, there is a second version of this work in the Metropolitan Museum. And it is on view, which is great. And it is beautiful. It actually is beautiful. And the one in Metropolitan is actually pretty big, which is unusual for Kuinji. He's mostly in these sizes. And over there, they state that he is Russian, born in Mariupol, Ukraine, which offends me. Yes, it is offensive actually. And then they speak about the Dnieper River depicted in this painting that took place from Moscow and runs to the Black Sea, which is maybe we're too nervous because of the war and all of the pain we have to go through. But again, how important that is that this river begins from Moscow and ends in the Black Sea. Is it that important to put it into label? And there is like Russia, Moscow, Russia, and it's a small message, but it's all filled with Russia. And yes, they've stated after, I believe that it was after 2014 when some people from Ukraine outreached to the Metropolitan Museum, and they've added that he was born in Mariupol, Ukraine. But today we want a different approach. Of course, it has to be scientific. It has to be a fact. It's not about emotions, but we've got to work in that direction. And what we see with Russian culture, where they've spent it huge money for the past 8 years to promote their culture, and they've been acting as a colonist. They are colonists. And today, what we're asking the world is to treat them as colonists. All the world is working to decolonize its collections, museums, etc. And we were colonized for many years by Russian Empire, by Soviet Union that inherited worst things of Russian Empire. And Russia today inherited that from Soviet Union. And they continue this work. And they're trying to erase our culture, and they've been trying to do it for many centuries, basically.
It's interesting that museums are really in America and elsewhere really focusing on how as simple a thing as what is included or not included in the information we provide to the public will either reinforce or break the myths that the culture has been perpetuating. And that is a perfect example of that. And yeah, I think increasingly too here we are hearing the same kinds of language that have been used about other empires and empire activities around Russia, and it all seems to fit really well.
In history, we see that no freedom was gained without sacrifices, without people who died for it. And that is the worth of freedom for the society. Sometimes when you have to stand for values where, for one basic value, the human in the center of everything. Sometimes, most of the times, it takes many sacrifices to stand for this simple idea. And that is what is going on right now.
And yet it feels profoundly unnecessary and terrible.
That's true.
You had mentioned that one way that American institutions can help is to commission works from Ukrainian artists for their collections. What are other ways you would like to see people help? I am less interested in people attending vigils and more interested in people doing things that can be of help.
That is extremely valuable. Well, I'm dreaming about big exhibitions that would speak about Ukraine and history of Ukrainian art in the United States. And I think that right now, people would like to know. Of course, I realize that American institutions, even after COVID, still have plans for many years.
Mm-hmm.
But this situation is, as COVID, it's unexpected and it's a game changer. So I think that it would be very great, very good. And many people are worried about the future of Ukrainian culture, but no one realizes actually what it is.
What it is.
Yes, and I think that that is extremely important. And also the history of Ukrainian art, even if we take 150 years, not all of it, or 100 years, it's all about, it's all linked with history of Ukraine, with history of our rebel, and of our fight for freedom. And it explains a lot. And also maybe speak a little bit about the series Chernobyl that was launched a couple of years ago. And a lot of people saw it, the HBO series, and asked, wow, how is that possible? And realized what Soviet Union was through this series, where they saw these outrageous lies and just impossible to understand why something like this could happen. The history of Ukrainian art actually explains how that is possible, how Chernobyl was possible in 80s, why today's war is possible. It gives an answer, and it's both about culture, about art, but also it explains a lot about Soviet Union and what we came through and where we came from. So I really wish this could happen.
Those of us who are smaller don't plan out so far ahead. So there's a possibility for things to happen. And I think the more people who know that you're looking to see something like this happen, the more they can be talking to their institutions, to their and to their elected officials. Frankly, the government could sponsor something like this.
I hope. And another thing which is very easy, and I think that if Ukrainians who are arriving right now to the United States had a possibility to visit cultural institutions with free admission or donation in some way, that would be a great support for people, because visiting museums in United States is expensive when you're a refugee and you're not certain about your future, and that is something people would rarely let themselves do. However, I can tell you from my experience, it gives a great remedy and gives you some support. You feel better after visiting a museum.
Yes.
And also it is important to give an opportunity to know better local culture.
And I think folks in communities that are accepting refugees, and I guess Rhode Island has not yet, but intends to get to know the people who've come. Exactly. That institutions can play a role there too. And if folks want to give money, do you have a suggestion for where they might send money to help with efforts like your museums?
We have some museums have their foundations, like we have a foundation and there is a donation button on our website. Right now I'm fundraising not only for Odesa Fine Arts Museum, but for other cultural institutions too. And it is Museum for Change, the non-governmental organization that I'm running at this moment. And also we accept donations and we use those money to support right now mostly people who work in museums, who stayed in Ukraine and who are working at risk. On Wednesday, the International Museum Day, I'm going to visit the Heritage Museums and Gardens, and they're planning to donate all of the admissions to the Odesa Fine Arts Museum to support our team, which is extremely important and valuable. And maybe other museums or cultural institutions would see this act inspiring, this action inspiring. And maybe we could match some museums from Ukraine with museums from the United States.
That's a wonderful idea. That's an absolutely wonderful idea. The US State Department long ago had a program that matched United States museums with international museums. But I think in more recent years that has fallen away. But I will going to take a look and see if it still exists, because that could get ramped up to help make it easy to have a brother or sister museum in another country and do some joint activities.
Okay.
I very much appreciate this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day. It was a pleasure.
You also.
Bye.
Bye.